All on her own?
I know.
As I tried to situate the paper, no matter how I folded it, it kept getting larger and larger until it was practically the size of a tent. I fell asleep and woke up in the mountains with my family, and then I woke up in a cave. The cave I woke up in, which must have been in the deep recesses of the cave, was at least lit, even if torches were kind of scary with their shadows and all, and the way they cast my own shadow everywhere. I gradually became fascinated with my own shadow, hoping my profile wasn't as bad as it looked, but it probably was, and this made me feel even more alienated from Buster Keaton. As I lay there, I began contemplating all the reasons I was bad marriage material. And by marriage material, I mean a real marriage, not the existential, ghostly kind that Keaton has told us happens every day of our lives. Here's the list that occurred to me at the time. I lost the list. If you find yourself laughing at any point, you'll be laughing at the film only. But a surprise was in store for both me and those older boys who stole the guns. The company left and my parents decided to take my brother and me on an evening walk. Amazingly, in a set of tactics I found it hard to believe for older kids, they had commenced their battle just 2 blocks away. As we walked in their direction, the sick feeling of guilt rising up into a disorienting vertigo, my father asked, "Aren't those your guns?" There was no way I could deny it. But could my father, even though he had broken rocks in prison, beat up that many older kids? He put his hands together and made a sort of flapping motion, and the boys immediately dropped my guns and ran for their lives. That gesture has made it clear to me that my father is not only the master of breaking rocks in prison, but of all word and gesture. But our real problems began in our adult lives. This, as Pip might have said, is where all our troubles began. Buster actually found a beautiful wife and got married. He even got a house as a wedding present from his uncle. Unfortunately, although it wasn't a marriage of convenience, it was definitely a house of convenience. It was one of those newfangled houses you build yourself, and if there's one thing Buster and I have never claimed, it was any sense of practical skills. As one can imagine, all kinds of things went wrong. Leaking roofs, Buster sawing himself off a plank, entire panels falling, and second-story doorways that lead to drop-offs. This latter phenomenon, even though I haven't lived as eventful a life as Buster, I can attest to actually existing. In my case, however, it was not a matter of bad house building directions, but to continue a previous theme, a matter of haunting. My first real home, the first time I really lived alone, although I didn't have to build it myself, was similarly mass-produced, or so I thought. Although I didn't notice it when I signed the lease, my new home was located smack between a graveyard and an old factory, which, because part of it had been torn away, had second and even third-story doors which led to drop-offs. I tried to console myself with the maxims I was starting to learn, such as, the productions of the bourgeoisie are ruins even before they have crumbled, but they were powerless against the larger forces that seemed to be at work. You see, these doorways that lead to drop-offs, as Buster must have realized while building his house, once we have seen our first, are, even more than Freud looking at himself in the mirror, emblems of the uncanny. We begin to recognize them everywhere, even as we know that we will never recognize the ones that pertain to us. That is why, no doubt, Buster was fascinated by multiple lives, the repetition that occurs over the ages. Who else would even have the idea, much less the genius and fortitude to carry it out, of exploring the similarities in love rituals from the Stone Age, ancient Rome, and the modern world of speed and greed? And what did Keaton discover about love in this exhaustive quest? That true love, at least attaining it, will always at some point require a catapult. We often speak of falling in love, but where do we fall from? Just as Marx and Engels noted about labor, no production is possible without an instrument of production, even if this instrument is simply the hand. And it is not possible without past accumulated labor, even if this labor is only the skill acquired by repeated practice and concentrated in the hand of a savage. No one can fall in love without at first building and then being thrown into the air by a catapult. Of course, everyone already knows this on a deep genetic level. Otherwise, the human race would never have propagated itself. As I look back at my own feeble attempts at falling in love and getting others to fall in love with me, I see, as with a second sight, that a catapult was always involved, one of my own making. The problem, however, is that I never knew I was making a catapult at the time. I just thought I was trying to get someone to fall in love with me. But now, knowing that I have to build one, I can do so deliberately, not leaving things to chance. I just hope that building catapults is easier than breaking rocks in prison. Okay, I have to admit that since the last scene, I tried to build a catapult, and a working love catapult is not so easy to build. Like Horace Walpole in his frenzied excitement after dreaming the plot to the world's first Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto, I threw myself into the task, possessed, not even stopping to sleep. Just as with Walpole's experience writing the novel, I was heartened by the knowledge that rather than trying to remember how my father broke rocks in prison, I was working from pure inspiration, so much so that the catapult seemed to be building itself. I knew that true love was just over the next fortification, but alas, although my experience started out as enchanting as Walpole's creative process, it ended as strangely as Walpole's castle of giant helmets falling from the sky, exploding saints, and urinating elephants. Truth be told, as I navigated the catapult's tunnels, vaults, grottos, and catacombs, I lost consciousness at some point. When I woke up, I was standing next to a river. Like Edward Muybridge without his camera or tripwires, like Buster Keaton stiffened on a stake, like you.